Moving on from where we left off in the last video. So I start with oil paint rendering on the wheels, and we'll start with the road wheels as they're a great place to warm up. The lip on the metal road wheel here really is our friend. I use it to push the bristles into because it's the obvious point where paint will accumulate and replicate dust accumulation. Ideally, the aim here is to feather out the dust effect towards the outer edge of the rubber road wheel. Depending on the environment we're depicting, the opacity and colour of the oil paint will vary so it accurately reflects the weathering we're trying to show. Keeping in mind, this is a DAC Panzer in Tunisia. The dust colour will shift from a dry tan colour to a yellowish light grey. It's interesting to note that soil types in Northern Africa vastly vary in colour and tone. There's browns, tans, greys and yellows. Weathering is not just about the application of dust or dust and mud, it's also about colours and tone. You'll notice that as I apply and then work with the oil paint, there is normally a period of time between each of those phases. So I'll jump from one point to another across the wheel and tyre surface. This is because after applying the oil, I want any residual thinner to have time to evaporate. Also relevant with this particular kit is the dust that will be on the contact surfaces of the wheels and suspension. So where I might try to keep the rubber contact surfaces clean on a European Theatre of Operations tank, here I need to have embedded dust. So I actually add oil to those contact surfaces, then remove the excess. And this leaves oil in the tiny pits in the paint so it looks like embedded dust. Onto the lower hull plates. So dry pigments are my go-to product here. I've custom mixed 2 sets using a Tylong 502 pigments for Tunisia. These have a distinct greyish tone to them, and I've added a little bit of yellow tan to suit this particular project. I start by dry brushing them on and rubbing them into the surface of the matte paint. So even though I'm going to add more pigments around the suspension components, rubbing pigment into the paint begins the process of laying age into the weathering that we're doing. Layering is important in every model, and we need to age the vehicle. It's not just a factory fresh vehicle that's come direct from the factory. And in Northern Africa, being a dry environment, this is something which is really important to get that really weathered effect. So in this area, you'd expect dust, rocks, scratches, stone chipping and wear from sand, which is simply like applying sandpaper to the painted surfaces. I'm using Mission Models thinner to bind the dust pigments and then apply the next layer. You'll notice that as I add layers, I'm actually pushing the brush into the previous layers. I really want this to look not only dusty, but abraded and worn. Here I'm using the airbrush to spit thinner over the dust, and this simulates staining from moisture and soil. Dust effects should never look monotone. The final part of this process is adding pigments with a slightly darker tone. There's a little mid-tan colour in this pigment mix, and this is brush applied as before, but I'm not using thinner to fix it to the surface. This will add a subtle mixture of dirtier dust that is visible to the naked eye. Much later in the weathering process I'll come back and dry brush dark oils through here to catch the edges of the suspension components. I've already completed an OPR dust layer over the turret, and this set the foundation for the effects that follow. Next step is to apply a fine dust layer to the spare tracks. So first step, as always, apply odourless thinner to condition the paint surface. The odourless thinner will not react with the acrylic paints on the tracks, so it's perfectly safe to use. Then I apply the light dust tone, ensuring it washes down into the cracks and joints between the track pieces themselves. Coming back with a blending brush, I adjust the opacity of the oil paint to get some variation across the track surface and blend each as required. It's long been known that Heavy dew will set surface rust on exposed metal surfaces in North Africa. Tracks not being used on a rolling tank will develop those bright orange colours of fresh rust. But here they will also be covered by dust and sand, so find a happy balance that appeals to you when doing this kind of weathering. Once I have the look I'm after, I simply check all the surfaces to ensure they are suitably adjusted for accuracy. And here you can see the progress to date. Dust over burnished and chipped paint has a very specific and satisfying look, but we aren't finished just yet. Let's complete the lower hull. The dust work on the turret has set the colour and tone choices to go forward. Now I'll finish the rear plate by adding dust and soil build-ups. The rear of any vehicle in a dry environment is going to show the most dust. So here I can go a little crazy. It's actually going to help me a little, as it will disguise the silvering in the unit decal, which sticks out like a sore thumb. To pump up the contrast and crew-worn areas, I'm going to dry brush on a controlled layer of dark oil paint. You'll see here that I'm using an older brush no longer suitable for OPR. I've dipped it in odourless thinner and then wiped it nearly dry, and then I drag it through the oil paint. It's crucial that I remove thinner here and work this brush and paint as dry as possible. Working over this front corner, I'm adding embedded dirt wear to show the location where crew are constantly mounting and dismounting the vehicle. Their boots will wear back dust and mud on those surfaces. They will burnish the paint and wear in dirt into the paint surface itself. It's like finding animal trails in the wild, and it's a very noticeable feature on used vehicles. I mostly use the side of the bristles to kiss the surface and add dark paint where I need it. The close-up photos showed just how subtle this technique is. It's supporting the burnishing and chipping that's already been done in previous steps. What's important here for me is that I need to remember that I'm probably going to do 2 more dust layers over this effect, so it's essential that I factor that into how I develop this finish. And just to prove that I'm not totally opposed to using enamel products, here you can see I'm adding some fuel stains to the rear engine deck. A subtle application is all that's required to add interest and draw in the eye of the viewer. You'll see I've also splattered on some oil stains using darker oil paints. Dust will partially cover these as we continue on with the weathering of more dust layers. Alright, we're nearing the end now. I like to use a soft graphite pencil to add the polished steel effects over the crew-worn areas such as the cupola, hatches and large chips. The reflective nature of graphite makes it perfect for this purpose. I also like to use it to pump up the highlights on vinyl tracks. Sand keeps these polished in the desert, and although dust certainly covers the track components, we cannot forget to polish these edges or we miss an easy upgrade. Remembering the beaten fender, let's polish that with a little pencil too. Last but not least is the installation and painting of the aerial. I tend to use thin wire. I heat it red hot, push it into the model and dab on a little CA glue at the hole. This holds the aerial in place and makes it more resistant to being accidentally dislodged. I'm painting it with a bright sandy yellow colour. The oil paint dust effect that comes over this needs to contrast to the base colour, so it shouldn't blend in and shouldn't look, well, kind of blah. And with that final piece, we're done. This old Tamiya kit has been a surprising joy to build. In many ways it has taken me back to the simplicity of my youth. Tamiya kits are well engineered, fit together superbly, and are just a joy to build. Whilst they do lack some detail of modern kits, an out-of-the-box build can still be enjoyable. Using modern building and weathering techniques, these kits can be elevated far beyond what we built in the 70s, 80s and 90s. This kit's going to reappear later as part of a planned diorama, so keep an eye out for her. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so and hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. It helps immensely to build the channel and allow me to bring you more content. So until next time, thanks for watching.